it, use it, break it, fix it, trash it, change it, melt, upgrade it, charge it, point it, zoom it, press it, snap it, work it, quick erase it, rewrite it, plug it, play it, burn it, rip it, drag it, drop it, zip unzip it.
I'm a humanitarian.
Use it, break it, fix it, trash it, change it, melt, upgrade it, charge it, point it, zoom it, press it, snap it.
Good morning, all. I suppose there are multiple magic things that happen at SwitchPoint beyond the fact that it's called SwitchPoint. I actually came with a prepared talk, and then 2 days ago, I met a couple of colleagues, and they started asking me a question around, what are you going to talk about? What's your focus? Was their question. And then I went to a breakout session. There are people who are in this room who were at that breakout session. The final, maybe the second to last question I was asked was, when did you decide to focus? And so I had to change my talk, obviously. I had to switch it up. Besides, that's why we're here, to SwitchPoint. And so my talk, as it's evolved upon being here, is titled Focusing on the Blur. Now, it is for me, it is an exploration point for me that is absolutely relevant to where I am now, as it has been for the entirety of my life. And so this is really a talk for me and not you. But thank you for allowing me to share this thought with you. The thing is, the problems we have to think about, the problems you think about, the problems everybody who's come on stage to express are multidimensional. Think energy, think healthcare, think education. You care about maternal mortality? Well, certainly you care about access to healthcare as well. And that perhaps involves a question around transportation. How are people getting to the clinic? Or maybe nutrition, really, because how people eat affects their response throughout their pregnancy. And we're not going to go down the path of capacity building and whatever else you want to think about. But you can choose to say, I am solving the problem, I'm problem-focused, okay? And you probably agree, if you're in here, that that problem is multidimensional. But if you did expand on that problem set, you might go down the linear path of, I know the problem is super complex and it involves all those things, but I just want to solve this one thing for now. And then once it's done, perhaps I'll solve the next one, and then I'll solve some other thing. That's one way. But quite often, many of us try this integrated solutions approach. And that means you say, okay, sure, I care about healthcare in general, or I care about maternal health, and so I do want to focus on community health workers, I do want to focus on behavioral change and messaging, I do want to focus on training both the households, people who are in the household and the staff, and I'll work at the intersection. That could also be an approach. And so there are two ends, there are two ways to think about this. The intersectionality that I want to talk about usually starts from being problem-driven or solutions-focused. But what's most interesting for me in how I think, and in the things that I've done, and in the open questions that I have, is on the methods and how you apply them. And that is where the blur is. So the focus part can be problem-oriented, or it can be solutions, and the solutions here is really the outcome. The solution that I'm talking about is not the specific method that you're using. And my general approach to this is it's okay to be blurry on the methods, and I'll expand on that a little bit by sharing how I have applied this in my past life through my PhD work, in my community engagement work, and in my current work at IBM Research Africa. Now, the blur can be anything, can be many things, but it is not the same as superficial. It is not the same as not knowing. It is not the same as, there are many things that the blur is not, but I want to focus perhaps on 3 things that it is for me. It gives you and allows you the freedom to continuously explore. Now, if you don't believe and are not married to a specific method, then you have to explore methods. And exploring methods mean you're continuously learning. And it is not the question around, yeah, I learned that this method can be used to do ABC. It really is that you have to understand the state of the art in its intricate forms in order to be able to apply it. And that's when you can discover. It's the combination of these things and perhaps a couple more that at the end of this talk, if you have ideas, do come add it to this list. It's what I consider to be the blur, and that's where my focus is, okay? So for the last 6 years, I was at MIT Media Lab where I did my PhD in prosthetic design as a biomechatronics engineer. And the way I arrived at this was from a problems-focused end, okay? I'm from Sierra Leone, lots of amputees in Sierra Leone, lots of amputees everywhere. My PI at MIT is an amputee, double amputee. And you say, hey, Hugh, you have been an amputee, a bilateral amputee, both legs. And you have experienced the use of prosthetic sockets or prosthesis. Usually when people think about prosthesis, especially for lower limb, you're thinking about the ankles. And Hugh has a bionic ankle. If you're in Sierra Leone, you perhaps have a wooden ankle or some very passive ankle. And then that's what most people think about when they think about prosthesis, about prosthetics. But actually, the most important part of a prosthetic interface, of a prosthetic device, is the interface, which is called the socket, which connects to your body. Because it doesn't matter whether you have a bionic ankle or not, or you have a peg, whatever you have. If the socket sucks, if the socket is not comfortable, you wouldn't use your prosthesis. And it is the most challenging part to design, because everybody's body is different. Your body changes. If you drank coffee when you came in, the volume of your body has changed. Depending on the time of the month, if you're a woman, your body changes. If you're standing a lot versus sitting down, your body changes. And all of these have very specific measurable effects on the comfort that you feel. So that's the problem. There are many solutions that people have used and that you can use to approach this, okay? You can say, and there are papers that have been written about this. Let's do MRI, okay? We'll image the limb, or we'll do CT, or we'll do ultrasound, or we'll use any kind of imaging method to capture a digital form of your limb, and then we can start from there. And perhaps some people can do soft tissue modeling, and there are people who specialize in the PhDs in this. Let's go understand how a soft tissue responds under load, because it really is what matters when you're pressing on your body. And there are these things called 3D printers. There are people who are experts at using and designing and making functional things on 3D printing. These are solutions. But I wasn't married to any one of these methods, because that was not my field, perhaps, when I started my PhD. I'd been working on inhalable vaccines in undergrad. Okay, so let's do this intersectionality approach and focusing on the blur with this example, okay? So if you take limb imaging and soft tissue modeling, you go from a limb and you put these markers on at specific locations, and you can do MRI and you can build very sophisticated models, and we've done this, okay? And you measure at those points where there are those nodes, you apply force and you see how the body displaces, and you build models that are predictive. If you add another layer of functionality to it, you say, okay, let's think about how we'll manufacture these. You can have computer-aided design sockets. People have had computer-aided design sockets before, but now there's something interesting. You can do multi-material sockets, and that means you can then vary its stiffness as your body's stiffness also varies. But that's not what we want. Our end goal has always been, how do you make it functional? How do you have it such that somebody uses it? It's about the intersection. The problem still remains the same. Our solution is on functionality, and it is at the combination of all of these 3 points that we were able to, and could only have been able to, design a multi-material 3D printed prosthetic socket that is functional. All right, so then I did this, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life afterwards, and IBM Research came calling, and IBM has about 12 labs, lots of scientists all around the world, and I was very excited about the fact that I could do applied research in Africa, and I'm from Sierra Leone, so it was an easy choice to move to the lab in Nairobi. And I'll talk briefly about some of the things that we do, including inclusive financial services. A lot of people don't have access to credit. How do you understand what people need to be able to give them financial services? Can you learn that from their mobile data? Can you think about how we can use blockchain, perhaps, to build trust in the public sector and to actually track various processes? I'm on the healthcare team, and my goal, our goal really is focused on how we use data and knowledge-driven methods to affect healthcare change. Other people, especially in the South Africa lab, we have 2 labs on the continent, one in Kenya and one in Johannesburg, are focused on the digital ecosystem and in exploring the universe. But it really is a mix of people who are applying many of these methods in functional ways. My first project was working in Sierra Leone on public health, and it was fascinating because all I've mostly wanted to do was focus in public health anyway. It's no secret, you guys know about Ebola and its impact in Sierra Leone. So before I joined, IBM had worked with USAID and OGI, Open Government Initiative, and the government of Sierra Leone, as Samir referenced yesterday, to think about how you combine a couple of methods. How do you do decision support at the district level using data for people who are making decisions? So that means taking quantitative data, taking qualitative assessment data, taking community messaging, and doing analytics on those such that the people who need it at the right time could make the decisions that they need to make. And another component to that was the citizen engagement, one that we did with OGI, Open Government Initiative. And how we did this was we went to Sierra Leone multiple times, built the solution with both of our partners, and did the training and implemented it. But that's not all I do. And so when my dad will say, but Moy, you really need to focus, I still didn't understand what that meant. Because what he really was saying there was, but why are you doing this youth learning business? Why is it that you have an organization that you're not 100% committed to, which is not a question of what the output of the organization was, but his own measurement of what he thought 100% commitment meant, I couldn't understand it. Because for me, my desire and my objective there was to inspire a generation to become problem solvers in Sierra Leone. So I did a youth initiative thing with some of my colleagues called Global Minimum. And we have a national youth challenge where kids can think about the problem, tell us how they want to solve it, and in return, we give feedback to all of them. This is hundreds of them now over multiple years. Connect them to mentors, bring them to camps where they build actual prototypes, give them feedback on those, and many of them go and implement those prototypes and actually do make a business out of it. But I also like rapping, and it's completely fine to freestyle. To freestyle when you're stressed, it's completely fine to be creative, it's completely wonderful to write. And so they're like, but Moi, you can't really be a rapper. Look, you're a scientist and you should be in the lab, and if you really want to do this, but rap is this, rap is that, rap is whatnot. But then if you think about the content, how one writes what one writes, and the ways in which we reach out to young people globally, what better medium than writing, than music. Now, I was lucky, whether my parents knew or pretended to not know, I was lucky at age 10 to be in a rap group with my older brothers, and we'd go out and compete live. And from perhaps 1 a.m., which is not necessary, which is why I suppose they would pretend to not have known. But those learnings that I got there exemplify two things that combines both the music and the youth learning. Music brings people across all ages together, but as a young 10-year-old, I was able to express myself, think about concepts, and share it across with the world. And as I grew older and I really cared about Sierra Leone and the culture that it represents, I wanted fashion. I wanted to be free. I didn't want to be wearing suits where I couldn't stretch and I couldn't gesticulate in the same ways that I do. And I like that freedom. But more importantly, it connected me with my mom, who is a fashion designer, and I could design and wear my own clothes when I wanted to. But it also represented this concept of pride in choosing batik, in interacting with my tailors who work with me in my shop in Sierra Leone, and in being able to draw up and doodle in a boring meeting a design of a shirt that could be worn at some other point when I wanted to be excited and be alive. Now, these are two instances where the blur and the solutions at that intersection is really what drove me. And it is not the same as superficiality. In my current life at IBM and moving forward, my interests are in these three things, and perhaps they've always been in these three things. I care and fully understand the power of data science, and whether that's just AI and machine learning and NLP techniques. But the method I'm not married to. The method doesn't matter if that does not have a relationship to the people. And that people being defined not just as data, because it's easy to think about people as data points, but people being defined as what problems do they really care about? What problems are we trying to think about? But again, combining these two is not as interesting really if you're not having an impact. And that's where the third component comes in. How these overlap and how these intersect is what drives my current interests and what drives the questions that I have. But this photo I took maybe 2 weeks ago, and I love taking pictures. I had bought this camera for a long time, and I didn't really use it towards the end of my PhD. And once we moved to Nairobi and we went away, and I brought the camera and I was playing with it. And the one feature throughout the entire photos that I took that I played with a lot was the focus. And in this instance, you all had looked at this photo. How many people in this room saw the people in that photo? Less than half. But that's my wife and my baby. And my focus, obviously, is on the people, but most importantly, on the blur. Thank you.
An economic miracle.